we see things like adversary in the middle attacks, for instance, where a user will be redirected to a malicious website and be asked to put in their credentials to log in, and they're brought to a web page that looks like a regular login page for, say, their bank or something like that, but it's not. And the URL might have like one character that's slightly different. It might be a 1 instead of an L or something like that, and they don't notice it, right? And so they put in their credentials, they hit click, and that's it. I mean, then the threat actors got the keys.
Some of the stuff you shared now, I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't know. It seems like crazy that Appreciate Key can save me from quantum computers. That doesn't seem to make sense, but that's just like me saying random things. So just before we continue with the interview, I've got to say that this video is sponsored by Cisco, but they're not forcing me to say certain things. This is a video about making the world a more secure place because it's Cybersecurity Month. We're not going to concentrate on Cisco product. I just want to get experts sharing with us how we can do things better and make our companies more secure and make ourselves more secure. So back to the interview. Hey everyone, it's David Bombal back with two very special guests. Kendall, Kirsty, welcome.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. Now, Kendall, let's start with you. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. Some interesting organizations you've worked for, right?
Yeah, I actually started out in the U.S. intelligence community before making my way to private sector. So I worked for the NSA and CIA for a period of time, mostly doing counterterrorism, actually, at that time. So my transition into cyber is sort of probably a bit of a unique story.
And you currently work for Talos, right?
I do, yeah, Cisco Talos, yep.
What do you do at Cisco Talos?
Yeah, so I'm a senior intelligence analyst and strategic lead. I am on their strategic analysis team. So the work that we do really focuses on looking at the threat landscape at a 30,000-foot view. So identifying new trends and patterns, trying to figure out what threat actors are doing the same or differently, and then really trying to level up a lot of the great work that my colleagues do to make it understandable for general audiences and executives and try to pull out those trends that can really help customers.
But I love this. I mean, you've worked for CIA, NSA, but you've also worked for Visa, right?
Yeah, just for a short time. But that was kind of my pivot from the classified world into private sector. The easiest way was kind of to take my intelligence analysis and strategic thinking skills and sort of parlay that into the cyber realm. So it's still tracking bad guys and identifying threats and all that stuff. And a lot of the work that I enjoy now is we do produce so much in the intel community, we would call it actionable intelligence.
Yeah.
But here it's finding things that really make a difference. We can make new protections for Cisco products. We can report on threats that are emerging, and those things really help people in real life. So it's very rewarding.
I love that. And you've been at Talos about it's like 7 years almost.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, I love that because I was going to say it just feels like the sky's falling sometimes with all the threats out there.
It does, and there's just so many parallels to the counterterrorism world that I used to work in, and that's certainly one of them. The sky's always falling, the bad guys are always reinventing, and it's sort of a constant game of cat and mouse.
I want to ask you some questions about, top threats, things companies are doing wrong, how we can protect ourselves. But before we get there, Kirsty, you've also got an interesting story. You were a maths teacher at one point, or math teacher for my American friends.
Yeah, I was. And that was incredibly fun. 11 to 18-year-old kids love learning math. And then after that, I left and I worked for the UK government, for the NCSC, National Cyber Security Centre, which is a part of GCHQ, for those listeners who may not be so familiar with it. And they're the National Technical Authority for the UK.
So GCHQ, just for people who are not aware, is similar to the NSA, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. It's the Government Communications Headquarters.
But you also did maths there, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So this is what I guess Alan Turing looks like now. It's more like me.
I love it. At the moment you work for Splunk.
That's right, yeah. So I'm a field CTO for the EMEA region at Splunk. You can probably hear I have a British accent, and I'm based in Switzerland, in Geneva, to speak a bit of French as well. My job is to go around and talk to our customers about their big strategic security problems.
I love that. I mean, I saw an interview where you were talking about when you were working for the UK government, you were like looking at AI and quantum computing and IoT, and like that is now reality. You were looking into the future, but now it's big today. Sorry, go on.
That's right. Yes. So my job was to horizon scan and find things that would affect the security of the UK in 5 to 10 years' time. So what was great about that job is I was doing it well because that stuff is happening today. So the things we see in AI, the developments in IoT security, making sure that we can't form large botnets and basic things like admin don't exist anymore. that regulation is now in place in the UK. So it's quite cool, actually. And I'm sure we'll talk about quantum. Can't stop.
So I'm going to ask you some questions now. Just for the audience, I put some tweets out and some messages out on social media asking for your questions, and I've got some of them here. But some of them are my questions. Hopefully, these are questions that you've got that you want answered. I get asked this kind of stuff all the time. So for either of you, Kendall, Kirsty, just answer, either both of you or whoever feels that you want to take the question. One of the top questions is, I think it's really important, like what are the top cyber threats, like top 3 or whatever your favorite number is, top cyber threats that we need to be aware of, in 2024 going into 2025?
Yeah, I can start with that one. The first one is ransomware. Ransomware, everybody's heard about ransomware, but It just continues to be a top threat, quarter over quarter, year over year, that is impacting our customers. And I think what this really shows is that it continues to work. It's effective. Cyber criminals continue to see ransomware as an effective way to steal or coerce victims to pay them money. There's been some changes in that space. We've seen an influx of less skilled actors coming onto the scene with some of the leaked ransomware code and builders hitting the internet, which I can talk about. But ransomware looms large still. And I think the other bucket of threats that we're looking at and that have been increasing are identity-based attacks. So these are any way that an actor can steal your identity, co-opt your valid account, et cetera, to do malicious things. And this can take so many different forms. They can steal credentials from, say, a previous data leak. They can buy stolen credentials on the dark web from initial access brokers. That's a big market. Password spraying attacks, brute force attacks, any way that they can get access to your legitimate account is what this refers to. And it's so effective, David, because once they have access to a legitimate account, it's so much easier for them to hide their activity, right? Because network defenders seemingly aren't looking at that account and the activity coming from that account with any suspicion. And then, of course, once they're in the network, they can do any range of things, like create new accounts, escalate privileges so they can get access to more sensitive information. They can conduct network reconnaissance. They can carry out internal social engineering attacks like business email compromise. I mean, it's really just a proliferation of threats from that point forward. So I'd say pretty consistently this year, we've seen ransomware and then identity-based attacks. And I think, we'll likely see those continue into 2025 as well. I
saw in the Talos report, I think is it 60% or something is identity theft, or is it like a really large number?
Yeah, I think that might speak to initial access. When we've been able to determine initial access in incident response engagements, something like 60 or 66% is valid accounts. So it is those actors going in and compromising legitimate users' accounts. So, we've got the data right there to kind of show that that's kind of at the root of a lot of compromises today.
So you mentioned BEC or BEC, I don't know how you pronounce it, business email compromise. Can you talk about what that is? Because it seems to, when I interviewed other people at Talos, it seems to be something that's ongoing.
Yeah, we saw a rise in that last quarter. It's not a new threat. It's a type of phishing where an actor will pose as a legitimate person and try to trick the user into sending them money or transferring funds in some sort of way. So there's a financial component there, but it's heavily reliant on social engineering and sort of tricking the user. And so when a user gets access to a valid account and steals an identity and they want to carry out a BEC attack, it's much more believable, right? Because it's being sent from an actual like corporate email account or from someone you think asking you, to move money around or to do any sort of nefarious activity.
What about vishing or where they, rather than phishing, like with the cell phones? Because I'm assuming that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, we've seen vishing. So vishing, for those who aren't familiar, that is phishing, but over the phone pretty much. So your threat actor is making a call to, it's usually somebody in HR and pretending to be someone they're not. And they trick that person into divulging usually like user credentials or something like that they can then use to access the network. And we've actually seen vishing quite frequently in MFA bypass attacks. That'll be when an actor will, call an IT help person and pretend to be some sort of legitimate actor, or perhaps even the user themselves, get that IT person to share the MFA login credentials, and then the actor can then authenticate, and then they can add additional devices and sort of kick off their operations from there. So that's also a very real thing, threat that we're seeing in terms of identity as it relates to the MFA side of the house.
The one that comes to mind is like the Las Vegas casino attacks, which I think was last year sometime. Yes.
I remember seeing that in the news. And, that goes to show how such a simple attack can affect, a company or an organization that you think would probably be immune from that type of low sophistication attack. So that's a great example.
So, I've got to ask this. Rachel Tobac, who I highly respect, did these demonstrations with CNN where she was able to use a phone just to like take over a reporter's account. Or the one I really like is where she used AI to fake voice, and she phoned, I think it was the secretary or a personal assistant of someone at 60 Minutes, and was able to get the passport details of that person just by mimicking the voice. So that seems to be a big problem. Kirsty, with your background in maths and AI stuff that you'd be looking at, this is a major nightmare.
Yeah, it's interesting how really there's two ends of the spectrum here. We're still seeing people get hammered by the most basic attacks, not having their basic cyber hygiene. The other end of the spectrum, some threat actors are turning to AI because their stakes are so high, and MFA bypass is quite a sophisticated thing at this point. They're really having to dig in and find these different TTPs to be able to access things. I think Vishing is quite sophisticated, and I would just caution organizations to make sure that they are fixing the problems they have. So it's quite nice to say we're defending against AI attacks, and those exist, but they're not the most common attacks. And so you really need to make sure that your cybersecurity hygiene is good enough that people are actually needing to turn to AI to attack you. But in a way, it's quite a good position to be in. It's obviously not ideal. It's just a whole new threat landscape now that people have to work with.
I saw Splunk have this document, and I'll link all of these below. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because in this document about like AI, it's reality versus, the anxiety people have. And like you just hit there, or like I mentioned, there's people are worried about AI because you see like Tom Cruise being mimicked online and stuff. But it sounds like that isn't as commonplace, right?
I would still say people are worried about AI phishing, phishing generated by AI. But in truth, how do you defend against phishing at the moment? You should educate your users. You should stop the mail ever getting to them. You should minimize the risks. If they do click the link, you should create a reporting culture so that they're rewarded for saying, yeah, I made a mistake and now we're exposed, right? That applies whether the fish came from a person or an AI. So there's always something about going back to basics and just making sure your defenses are robust at every level. And it will help you against AI for sure, but also against this huge swathe of attacks that we still see today.
So, let's talk about mistakes companies are making. So is it not looking after the basics, right? So do you have like top 3 mistakes or something along those lines, things that companies are doing wrong, and then, what things can they do better? So either of you, what mistakes are you seeing companies making out there, and like what are the top 3 things that they can perhaps do better?
I would say like straight off the bat, ransomware is still a problem. Still do backups. Yeah. Check your backups, exercise regularly, put them somewhere, not on the place that will get ransomware, right? Like just straight up, just do that. That's my number one.
Yeah. And I think, absolutely. That's, you think about going back to security fundamentals, right? And the first thing that comes to mind is multi-factor authentication, MFA. Like we see so many cases of companies and organizations that could have prevented an attack if they had MFA deployed. And some organizations will roll out MFA partially, but it needs to be throughout your organization, on every endpoint, on every system, especially those network-facing devices is huge. And secondly, and this might sound obvious again, but patching. We see, so many compromises still happening where actors are exploiting known vulnerabilities. We know that there's challenges to patching for organizations, especially on those network-facing devices. Perhaps they don't fall within the normal patch management schedule, or patching might cause downtime. But as much as organizations can, you've got to have a good patch management strategy in place, and that'll stop like a lot of the attacks off the bat.
I totally agree. And it goes to that point that, yeah, it's great to say we need to defend against AI and 0 days, but actually vulnerabilities that are years old are still being used against organizations. So patching, absolutely, an MFA, I couldn't agree more. I think we would be having a very different conversation today if every organization used MFA throughout the organization.
To Kirsty's point too about user education, I think that is so huge, especially as we look at the data around identity-based attacks and how that's increasing. You know, there's security solutions are great, but you know, to a large degree, so much of this really depends on the user, knowing how to spot something that looks suspicious, knowing what the current trends are out there in terms of TTP tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, and that'll really help an average user be that first line of defense against a lot of those social engineering attacks that we're seeing happening.
And actually, to spin on that, when you have users that are willing and excited to do security, encourage them, right? So if you spot something that is malicious towards that user, you reported a phish, great, you were the first person to do that, we give you a gift card, right? How many more reports would you get if that was the culture in your organization?
Yeah, it's interesting in this Splunk report again. Human beings are the common denominator, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, we said social engineering, it preys on fear, it preys on urgency. These are human emotions. And psychologically, when you make a mistake at work in any profession, who sits there and says, yes,
exactly.
That was me, I hear this in the room. It's much more common to try and hunker down, to try and cover your mistake. And we say, yes, you should report if you click a link, but actually people are embarrassed, they're ashamed, they don't think they're going to be rewarded, they think they're going to be punished, they may even think they'll be fired. So how can you encourage users to report a phish all the time and consistently and quickly, because that will actually reduce your risk. The quicker you know about a problem, the better you can advance your defenses, you can respond to that incident, and you can contain any damage that's been done. So we need to think about the human side of it in defense as well.
I definitely agree. Being able to self-report is key, but there's so many social engineering attacks where users don't even know that they've been compromised.
Yeah.
We see things like adversary in the middle attacks, for instance, where a user will be redirected to a malicious website and be asked to put in their credentials to log in, and they're brought to a web page that looks like a regular login page for, say, their bank or something like that, but it's not. And the URL might have like one character that's slightly different. It might be a 1 instead of an L or something like that. And they don't notice it, right? And so they put in their credentials, they hit click, and that's it. I mean, then the threat actors got the keys. And so it's one thing to self-report, but I think it's another thing to just be aware of, like, at a very high level, at least, what threat actors are doing, to just be a little bit more judicious, I think, in kind of your day-to-day activities.
Yeah, so my next question was going to be, okay, how do we solve it, right? You can't blame the users, like you've just said. Is it MFA? What are the solutions? What do companies need to do?
I think the discussion here is, just underscores it's both, right? We have so much data from our incident response engagements to back up the problem that is lack of MFA, misconfigured MFA, valid accounts, and identity-based attacks as the initial access vectors. And those are all, a lot of that patching can be on like the technical and sort of security side of the house. But there's also, of course, this user education component that is essential to spotting at least some of those social engineering attacks. So I do think it's a mix of both.
If I was going to look at really the big picture, I might think in the ecosystem, how can we fix it, right? As a big cybersecurity community, could we demand better things of our UIs so that when I access something in a browser, it will tell me, oh, this is a new site. This isn't a site you visited before, something like that, right? There have to be advanced systemic places where this is easier for users as well. So there's really a lot of places it could change. Everything Kendall said is stuff we can do today and we should be doing today.
Yeah, I push back from the audience, right? Because I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Talking about backups is terribly boring, and it's the stuff you've been saying in the cybersecurity community for the last 20 years. So is it just the same old boring stuff? We have to get the basics right?
I'm bored of saying it, if it helps. I mean, if you're bored of hearing it, I'm bored of saying it.
We wrote a while ago a blog or something, and part of the title was like, what's old is new, right? Like the same things that work for threat actors, they're going to keep doing those same techniques. And so, we're often looking for like new trends to report out and sort of interesting findings to flag. But, the truth is a lot of it is, things stay the same, because as long as this is, continues to be effective for the threat actor, there's really no reason for them to change it up.
So we need to get better at storytelling. I think as a community, like you say, Kendall, about taking something, what's the impact of that thing happening? Let's put meat on the bones, make it much less dry, much more interesting to people.
I find it like on YouTube, just as an analogy, I get a lot of pushback when I show like hacks, but it's like if you can show people what's possible and how easy it is to do these hacks, it really hammers it home, I think, sometimes. The community that shows these kinds of stuff ethically and teaching, educating people through like a cool demo, hopefully drives it home, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kendall, you mentioned MFA a few times, but MFA fatigue is a big problem. I did a video recently where I was talking about this UK teenager. He was in a hotel just up the road from where I am, and he hacked Rockstar Games, bunch of companies just through MFA fatigue. So that is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing that in our data as well. In incident response engagements, that's definitely one of the ways that actors are, circumventing MFA. So for folks that aren't familiar, that, when you have your mobile device, you go to log in to your secure network or your work email or what have you, and you get a push notification to your device. So MFA fatigue is when a threat actor will flood your device with MFA requests in hopes that eventually you'll be like, oh, well, that must be a real one. Let me just accept it, right? So you're fatigued by the number of requests. So that's a tough one. That's a tough one to defend against. I think, again, to Kirsty's point, that might be a self-reporting situation. Having that awareness to say, this is weird. I got all of these requests. I wasn't even trying to log in. Let me level that up to somebody. But you're absolutely right, David. That's something we're definitely seeing in the data.
It's already raising the bar, though, for an attacker. Instead of just having nothing there because there's no MFA, now they have to do another stage in that attack, right? Add something else. They have to fatigue somebody into accepting the MFA request. So that's already raising the bar. And that's the thing. None of these solutions are silver bullets. It's not going to fix every attack ever. It's just going to make things harder. And why not make things harder? Why not make you less of a valuable target? If I have MFA and Kendall doesn't, who are you going to attack? Right? It's just about raising the bar so that it's harder for everyone to get attacked in the end.
No, I love that analogy. I mean, it's like physical home security. It's horrible to say this, but I mean, I think just generally you want to make sure your security is better than your neighbors, right?
I think the same, line of thinking goes with patching. It's not exciting to talk about. It's kind of boring, but if you take Kirsty's example, a threat actor that sees a known vulnerability is patched, they're probably going to pivot to a different organization that doesn't have that patch because it's easier, right? So it's just that sort of first line of defense. Sort of deter them when you can.
Now, I'm going to have to push you on this because I know we're talking about the basics, but I think based on the questions I received from the audience, the number one question was about AI. So I've got to address this. AI for hacking, AI for defenders. In the report from Splunk, I saw that, AI, in the past, the attackers had the advantage of AI, like writing emails, perhaps, the voice cloning, all that kind of stuff. But it seems people are feeling that, AI is more balanced now. So it's not just the attackers that are winning, but it still feels that way. So, what's your take on AI for attackers versus defenders? How's it going to change things? So I'm just going to open it up, like AI changing the landscape, also AI for jobs. Is it going to take jobs away, that kind of thing? So Kirsty, you've had a lot of, background in AI. Perhaps you can, take this and, what is like hype versus reality?
Yeah, there's so much to answer here. So as you said, AI for defenders, AI for hacking. There's a third stream people forget about, which is securing AI itself. So if you are using it, don't forget that's another software supply chain issue. That's another vendor you have to manage potentially. It's another attack surface. So don't forget about protecting your models itself, right? And to do that, a lot of it is good software development practice. Just do a lot of that stuff and you'll be pretty covered. Splunk Research released some research on applying OWASP top 10 to machine learning and AI workloads. So making sure you can still protect that stuff itself. On attackers versus defenders, who's winning? Doesn't it feel like the attackers are always winning? Because they just have to be successful one time, one time. So I see why people feel that way. I think in truth, the winner will be whoever uses it, right? So initially, a lot of defenders were very hesitant to use it. They didn't want to have this kind of data exposure risk. There was all this kind of rumors about not being GDPR compliant for certain providers. And people didn't want to expose their data. I think it's very reasonable. But attackers have no such ethics or concerns. They can use the tools as they like, and so they did. So as we started accepting more and more AI into our workflows, into our streams, and with our analysts, we're seeing the balance tilt back.
We see this in the threat landscape. Any new technology that comes out, it's a race between threat actors and defenders as to who's going to harness it sort of first and best. And we're seeing this with AI. And yeah, it is a lot of the time this doom and gloom reporting, right? About threat actors use AI to do this or that. And the stories that aren't reported out are what sort of how defenders are leveraging AI. And there's a whole range of ways that we can and are doing that. We can use AI to help with threat intelligence. When you talk about, extracting lists of IOCs from a report or MITRE techniques from a report that you can then use to prioritize certain defenses in your organization. You can use AI to help understand if a certain vulnerability has been exploited. If so, how frequently? If so, in what industries, right? And that can sort of help your security organization prioritize where to put their security resources. I challenge folks to kind of think about how we can harness AI in the security world. And I think there's probably jobs in that field that we don't even know about yet, right? Because we're still figuring it out as we go. But I think, that's certainly a trend we see in this space. I mean, you look at one of the things that came to mind was QR codes. Yeah. There's been this rise in actors using phishing campaigns with QR codes that require users to scan the QR code and then it redirects them to a malicious page. That was a new technology, right?
Yeah.
Well, now we have email detections that can catch QR code phishing emails, right? And using the same technology to kind of bolster our defenses. So when any sort of new technology comes onto the market, it's going to be this case of, good guys and bad guys trying to leverage it. But I think there's definitely opportunities, as Kirsty laid out, for defenders to take advantage of it as well.
Because this was a common thread in the questions, and I'll just kind of summarize. Where do you see network security shifting in the next 5 to 10 years with regards to AI capabilities and machine learning? But also, the big one is, am I going to be obsolete, right? So is it worth, a question I often get on YouTube is it worth getting into cybersecurity if I'm younger or just want to get into this industry, because in 5 to 10 years I won't have a job?
Oh, you'll have a job. You'll always, in my view, it's one of those things you'll always have something to do. What you do will change. I think, maybe maybe we'll look back in 10 years' time and go, how funny, people were still being ransomware. Thank goodness we've got past that now. Maybe the job will change. But I would say what that means is, instead of learning a particular coding language or a particular set of techniques or something, the best thing you can do is prioritize adaptability, because the job today is not the same job it was 10 years ago, and it will not be the same job in 10 years' time. So yes, you could learn prompt engineering, but people who are working in the stock today and joined 10 years ago, they didn't know prompt engineering. They've had to learn it, and they can, because they're adaptable, they're curious, they're open, and they're humble. So those are the things you should be prioritizing in terms of soft skills, and that will make you successful in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I agree. And I this might sound sort of, idealistic or fantastical or whatever, but I just feel like the job that, if somebody's listening who's a teenager or in their, about to start college or something like that, I just feel like the job that you are going to have in 10 years is a job you don't even know exists right now. Or that you're not even tracking. It's not even on your radar. Somebody said, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? That probably isn't even entering your consciousness, because you don't know that it's even a possibility. And so, I think that plays to Kirsty's point around being adaptable. And I think too, if you can lean into the things that you're good at, yes, InfoSec fundamentals are important, coding, programming, that'll definitely give you a leg up. But think about, what you're passionate about and what your skills are. Maybe that's communication. Maybe that's strategic thinking. maybe that's, I don't know, like taking things apart and putting them back together, whatever that is, that can probably be translated into the security world. And that's certainly what I did. I didn't have a technical background, but I found this thing that I was good at, which was, sort of looking at seemingly disparate pieces of information and trying to make, more strategic meaning out of it and thinking in an analytical way. And now I'm a bit of a unicorn, honestly, on my team. Everybody's highly technical, and I'm kind of looking at things through a different lens. And so that's not something that I, anticipated doing when I was younger, right? But through sort of finding my passion, I was able to sort of relate that to the field. And so I think as we look at what's happening in the field year over year, get those InfoSec fundamentals down. Sure, do your trainings, but if there's other soft skills that you're good at or that you like, there's probably a way to leverage those as well in the field.
I love this. I mean, we've already got into this conversation, but I'll ask the question anyway. If you spoke to your younger self, what would you advise?
I guess for me, I would probably say, Kendall, take some programming and coding classes, because I entered the, cybersecurity world. I guess there are a lot of former Intel folks I work with, but a lot of them did do technical work in their previous careers. I did not. And so, but I like threat hunting. I like hunting the bad guys. I like looking at trends. I like, leveling up things that are important for executives and companies, and just really taking that high level strategic vantage point. So I've had to kind of like hone my technical skills, on the run as I've been here over the last 7 years, and I've done that. So, I mean, for me, if I had known I was going into cyber, 100% would have like beefed up my technical skills a bit more. But that's probably opposite than a lot of folks that may be watching.
I mean, I think it's a good point, but I probably would say you're technical enough, like to everyone, right? Like, I think if I could tell my younger self, I'd be like, you're technical enough. Like, yes, you don't know every programming language in the world. No one does, right? Yes, you can code. Someone else doesn't mean anything, actually. Like, you're technical enough to do the job, right? And I think anything you don't know, you can learn. It's really not about knowledge. It's much more about skills. So I think probably that would be the message I would take, that you only have to really study something. It could be an attack. It could be a TTP. It could be one actor. If you really went for it and you did nothing but that for a month, you would probably be one of the global experts at it, right? Because there's just so much that it's very rare for somebody to have the time to specialize in that thing. So really, it doesn't take long for you to become a true expert in something if you're dedicated and if you're looking at it. So pick what that thing is, what you would like to do, and hone in on that. But really, it's about skills, not knowledge, because knowledge ages off and skills are evergreen. So try to prioritize the kind of things you want to do rather than the things you want to know.
Yeah, and I would say two other things that aren't specific to any particular field that come to mind. First one is internships. I think internships can really set somebody apart in the interview process. Not only does it give you a chance to sort of test the waters and see what you like, it's one thing to have a list of skills on your resume on paper, but to actually have an experience where you put those skills into practice and then you can talk about that in an interview, I think is just like incredibly valuable. And the second thing, and I learned this a little bit later in my career, but the value of networking. Yeah. And I think that that's something that a lot of folks in this field shy away from, because a lot of us are introverts, myself included. And it wasn't until like later in my career that I really understood the value of, how relationships can help you in your career. And so I would encourage folks to, as much as you can, push yourself outside your social comfort zone to make those connections, in college, professionally, with your colleagues, because you never know down the road where you might want to call on them to, refer you to a job, or they might have you in mind when something comes up. You just never know. So I think that that's definitely something I'd pass along too.
I totally agree on both of those. I think as well, sometimes I've heard people say, I can't get an internship, so I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I've applied for things, I can't get there. So don't let that hold you back. The question I always used to ask in interviews is, what's the most complex technical project you've ever done? And it doesn't matter if that's in an internship, in your university degree, just at home, right? If you get a Raspberry Pi and you decide you're going to ping some API and you're going to light up an LED screen in a certain way, depending on the temperature that day, cool, right? Tell me how you did that. If you're enthusiastic, you can do quite a lot as a hobbyist. You don't need to wait for a job to do that. We have a lot of resources that are openly available. And of course, it takes time, but if you've got the time and you really are passionate about getting in the field, make your own projects. Do something you want to do. What is annoying you? I had a friend who every day he used to leave the house and he'd be checking on his phone when the train was, if it was delayed, and he would check the weather. So he knew if he had to take an umbrella or if he was overdressed and going to be really sweating on the train, whatever it was. And he was like, you know what? This is insane. I'm going to start projecting that on a screen. So not only can I see it, my partner can see it. And halfway through the day, it flips so that they knew when he was going to be coming home, if the train was going to be delayed, et cetera, et cetera. What a cool project. And no one told him to do it. He just thought, you know what? I could do this. I'll just poke around. I'll learn some stuff along the way. Fantastic. What a great project to have done.
I'm not sure if it's possible to answer this, but I'm assuming both of you have hired people or interviewed people. So I'd like to get your input, from the other side. What makes a candidate stand out? Like, Kirsty, you mentioned like the Raspberry Pi example. I mean, stuff like that, makes someone look different to, say, all the other candidates. But are there any sort of tips and tricks you can give to someone to, get ahead?
So what I'm actually really looking for is curiosity and passion. And those are the two things. So if you have 10 coding languages or if you have 0, I don't really mind. I'm looking for this kind of aptitude, this curiosity to learn more, and a passion for doing so. So there's obviously a natural bit of aptitude, how coding works, logical flows, things like that. But I don't really usually care if you've got this language or that language. So I would say try to think more about why you're interested in the subject. A great question I used to ask on interviews is, how does the internet work? Everyone has some understanding of how the internet works, right? Even someone incredibly technical will go, I connect to the Wi-Fi and then I go to a browser and the internet is there. And you can just probe, like, how much further can you go? What happens when you connect to the Wi-Fi? Where does that go? And sometimes people say, it's just the internet's just in the Wi-Fi box. And you're like, but where does it go? And they're like, no, just back to your phone. Yeah. So they really think the entire internet is stored on the Wi-Fi router. And that told me a lot, right? They don't have this kind of aptitude. They've never been curious about learning more. It's questions like that are very open-ended, I think, make the best interview questions, because I'm not looking for a laundry list of, have you done this? Yes, no. That's kind of boring to me. What I want to know is, are you interested? Are you passionate? Are you curious? Do you have an aptitude? Even if you don't know exactly how the internet's working, can you figure it out? It's the World Wide Web. There's a clue, So that's the kind of thing I would always ask in an interview.
Yeah, I love that. I certainly ask like a lot of sort of problem solving type questions, right? Like, but I think one of the things I'm looking for when I interview people is how can they tell a narrative about, like, regardless of what question they're answering, can they form an argument? Can they have evidence that backs that up? And are they communicating to me in a way where I can easily identify like what their main takeaway is? Yeah. What is the key part of their answer that they're trying to tell me? And does their supporting evidence make a case for that? And that tells me a lot about not only how they can communicate, but probably how they can write. But most importantly, how do they perceive the information in front of them? What skills do they have to identify what the most important things are? What is kind of minutia? And then are they able to tell me kind of what the impact of that is? And, we talked earlier about how communicating in that way can be so important today, because so much of the security guidance is often the same, right? Yeah. And I think a very important part of our work is being able to communicate. And I think a lot of that gets lost. And I think, you look at a lot of the security trainings that are available today, there's not a whole lot that's available in the realm of like strategic thinking and intelligence analysis and, communicating to non-technical audiences. And I think to the extent that somebody can come off, really polished in an interview, that just goes so far in this field, so just practice, get in front of a mirror, or, as you're driving in the car, you just practice talking through those answers. But I'll tell you, I mean, you can come across really sharp if you can just, get your point across, couple ticks of evidence, And I think that really goes a long way.
Kirsty, you've got the maths background and you've done a lot of work in this field. I need to ask you, there's this fear again that all encryption is going to be broken very soon. Like AES is going to die, all the rest of it, because of quantum computing. So perhaps you can talk to that. Is it true? Do we have to worry about quantum computing? How's the world going to change? When is it going to change? Again, open-ended question.
Yeah, fantastic. So I actually wrote 3 blogs about this, which I'm sure we can share, around why quantum computing is like fairy tales. So the first question is, is it the emperor's new clothes? Does it really exist, this threat? And as far as I remember, the quantum computing threat has always been about 15 years away. And it's been like that for the last 30 years. So a nice healthy dose of realism here. It's not going to happen tomorrow. We're going to have quite a bit of lead time up to when it does happen. But that's not to say you shouldn't prepare for the possibility of an eventual threat. So the advice I always give is, in the case that quantum computer exists, it will not break. AES is not the thing to worry about. RSA and elliptic curve Hellman, public key exchanges, those are the things to worry about first. Then signatures. Why in that order? Because signatures I care about at the point of verification. I don't actually care about that at the point of signing. So we need to make sure that the exchange that's happening, key exchange, that is protected. So that's the first thing people should prioritize. Then signatures, and then other kind of block ciphers like AES come afterwards. So it's not the case even that all encryption is gone. It's just a very few parts of it. And so, when you're making your plan, make sure that you are creating an asset inventory so you know what you have to migrate and the order you should migrate it in as well. Think about the data, because you need that data to stay secret for a certain amount of time. Lots of data, it doesn't matter today that it's not encrypted in a post-quantum way, in a quantum-safe cryptography. It doesn't actually matter, because by the time a quantum computer arrives, that data is obsolete, or it's no longer interesting or relevant. So a data tiering strategy is very important. Making sure you know your assets is very important. And all of this is in the blog, but in a hilarious way, it's about the boy who cried, quantum wolf. The story kept saying, it's coming. And then when it did come, no one believed him. So I think as an industry, we have to be quite careful that we're not overhyping the threats either. We're not underhyping it either. And then the final blog that I wrote was about Goldilocks and how, her porridge was too hot, too cold. And there was just right time to migrate to quantum cryptography. So you don't want to be too fast, because you won't be interoperable. And possibly you'll be moving to something with a poor implementation, something that hasn't been robustly tested. Nor do you want to be too late so that you're vulnerable to the threat. You want to be just right. And so the just right time is not yet. I think if you moved, it would still be too soon. And for the large majority of organizations, that would be the case. There are some very particular use cases where you should be thinking about moving quite soon. But in any case, you should be making an asset inventory. It's good security practice anyway. If you don't know the assets you have in your organization, how can you protect them? So that just helps you, and additionally prepares you for the quantum threat as well.
When you say that we need to prepare for this, let's say I want to start now, what does that actually mean?
So you have to look at all the data you've got and decide for how long you want it to remain secret. And if the answer is 100 years, then okay, you should be thinking about it. If the answer is, after a week I delete that data, that's probably not your priority for migrating to the quantum threat, right? If an adversary attacks your data that is encrypted with classical cryptography, there's this store and decrypt system where they have to save off all of your data for a later date to decrypt it at a later date when a quantum computer is available. So it's not a minor adversary; it's quite a sophisticated adversary with lots of resources that would be doing this. So think about if you are in that target group, if you would be targeted by a large, sophisticated adversary. Think about the data you have, if you need it to remain secret for many, many years, or if actually you're deleting that data anyway after a week. Don't migrate that system first, right? So look at all the data you have. Think about things that will age off. If you're replacing that legacy system in the next year, don't prioritize that for a quantum migration. So that's what it means. It means look at all the things you have, the system, the data, and make an ordered list, a priority of migration. Make sure you know who those data owners are. Make sure you know who's responsible. And once you've got that, then start thinking about the types of cryptography you're going to need to move to. All of the algorithms that have been standardized have different properties. They're larger or smaller key sizes, for example, and think about what's most appropriate for your use case. But today, there aren't robust implementations that exist for all of these. It takes time for the ecosystem to build up. We have now the standards from NIST. That's quite recent and quite new. but we still don't have implementations in protocols, for example, that's still being developed. So we have to think about what's an appropriate time to migrate. And it's not yet, but you can certainly get yourself prepared and ready.
Let's say I've got this hard disk that I want to keep secret for 20 years because it's my my cat, photos of my cat or whatever, but I need to keep it secret. Do I encrypt that with like RSA? What do I need to do today? Is there like for the quantum like change, or is it like still like just know what I need to encrypt and then wait?
Yeah, so if you think a sophisticated adversary would store your data to then decrypt it at a later date, you should now be thinking about the quantum cryptography you would use to protect the key exchange and make sure whether you're using RSA or elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman that you can change the cryptography being used for that, the cryptographic algorithm, and use the new post-quantum standard algorithm.
Kirsty, do you think quantum protocols are coming anytime soon? It sounds like you said the 15-year thing.
They're already here. So technically, if you've got a pre-shared key in your, so IKE version 1 is quantum safe, actually. So adding a pre-shared key makes you quantum safe. Work has been done in the IETF to prepare protocols for these larger cryptographic artifacts, so bigger key sizes, bigger certificates. So it's already being worked on in IKE, for example. They've already published RFCs to deal with message fragmentation and handling larger cryptographic artifacts that come from post-quantum cryptography. But work is ongoing still, say in the TLS group, to work out how you can create a hybrid in a reliable, consistent and secure way. And once those structures have been created, then the cryptographic algorithms can be sort of dropped in, combined as needed. It's a slightly different process on the side, but the work is ongoing in the IETF.
I'm glad you said that, because I mean, I think the there's this concern that quantum is going to break everything that we have today. So you're saying that that's not true, right? Some of the stuff's already going to be safe against quantum.
Yeah, it's being worked on right now. Anything that already uses a pre-shared key, that's actually quantum safe. Ironically, in IKE version 1, but now it's been added to other protocols as well. It's taken out of TLS and put back in exactly for this reason. So we have some protections if people are very concerned that they can put in today using a pre-shared key. So it's interesting that's not, but it is post-quantum cryptography, but it's not using the algorithms that are standardized.
Some of the stuff you shared now, I didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't know. Do you have a place where we can go to like see like the updates, like the IKE thing, and you know how it seems like crazy that a pre-shared key can save me from quantum computers? That doesn't seem to make sense, but you know that's just like me saying random things. Is there a place we can go where you can actually see, you know, what's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So the IETF has many protocols, many groups working on different things. So they created one central group, which is called PQUIP, the PQUIP. And that's a working group that collates together all of the updates that are happening across the IETF. So there's work ongoing in the COSO protocol, in TLS, in IKE, where protocol engineers are working to integrate quantum structures and make sure that these protocols can support the carrying of quantum artifacts. The keys are much larger, certificates may be much larger. So making sure that their protocols can support that. And all of those updates, they're on a page that we can link on GitHub. You can see each of the drafts, each of the finished RFCs as well. And they're all catalogued there. So it's a really good resource.
Yeah, I mean, that's great because, I mean, I think the concern is Diffie-Hellman is out the window, RSA is out of the window. All our pre-shared keys, all our public and private keys are out of the window. IKE's out of the window, but it sounds like that's not, that fear is maybe greater than people, you know, it's maybe just FUD really. It's already been worked on.
Yes, yeah, it's already been worked on. I mean, the NIST competition process, I can't remember when it started, but it was a long time ago. And for a long time, cryptographers have been thinking about this. They've been doing lots of research, lots of testing, lots of implementation. And in the IETF, as early as 2019, there was a proposition in the IETF to combine classical and quantum cryptography into a sort of hybrid structure, so that even if the classical cryptography is broken, you are protected by the quantum and vice versa. So that was really helpful during this period of transition while the algorithms were being tested. There's a lot of rigor gone into the process. Some quantum algorithms were very famously broken quite publicly, quite late in the process. But that's the beauty of having this kind of transitional period where people can feel that their data is still secured in either case. And then as we come closer to the kind of, well, now it's been standardized, now the protocol work has been done, there's a lot still ongoing, lots of discussion and a lot of bright people working on it. But once the standards exist in the IETF, we'll start to see software libraries, OpenSSL and different open source libraries, as well as browsers starting to adopt those new protocols. So I think don't panic and definitely don't roll your own, don't implement your own code. Use these big, well understood libraries and make sure that you are keeping up to date with these updates and watching the IETF RFC stream, because that's really the place to go for the most up-to-date developments in protocols and content cryptography.
So Kirsty, are there real algorithms that exist, and can you mention some of them, or tell us, because I know RSA, I know AES, but what are these quantum algorithms? What are they called?
I know. I was just going to say they're all named after Star Wars, and I only found this out quite late because I'm not a Star Wars fan. But originally there was New Hope back in 2015. If you're a Star Wars fan, can you just nod encouragingly so I know that I'm on the right track? And then we have Crystal's dilithium and Crystal's kyber. So they're the names of two of the algorithms. They're now called FIPS 205. It's not as exciting, but when they were going through development, there's Sphinx, Blast, and Falcon. And so far we've had one key encapsulation mechanism standardized and 3 digital signature algorithms standardized. And they use different underlying cryptographies. So RSA is based on large primes and the difficulty of factorizing. When 2 primes are multiplied together, it's very easy, but it's very hard to factorize a very large modulus when there are 2 large primes that are the only factors. That's the underlying hard problem. The underlying hard problem involves a different type of mathematics that is resistant to attack, called lattice-based cryptography. That's what the key encapsulation mechanism is based on. So these different underlying hard problems are incredibly difficult for a quantum computer and a classical computer, whereas factorizing a large modulus takes seconds for a theoretical quantum computer. So that's the difference between the algorithms and the underlying hard problems that they're based on.
So Kirsty, I've heard quite a bit about quantum from different experts. I'm glad that you've made the point that don't cry wolf, because that seems to happen a lot with technologies. So just start getting prepared for it. So I suppose the first thing is, where can people go? Is your blog articles are a great place to start, right? Yeah,
definitely. So the 3 blogs are available on Splunk, and they cover if the threat is real, if you know that the threat applies to you, and how you can decide the right time to migrate to you.
So I'll link those below for everyone watching. Go and read about it, because it's like, I've heard so much hype about this, and it's great to hear from Kirsty, like experts like yourself, that it's time to get prepared, but it's not like the sky's falling tomorrow. Kendall and Kirsty, this has been fantastic. I could keep you for much longer, going into the depths of quantum and talking about the Talos reports, but I know we have to wrap it up. So Kendall, you work for Cisco. Kirsty, you work for Splunk. It's been a while now since the acquisition. How is Cisco and Splunk working together to make the world a better place, a more secure place?
Yeah, I can speak to a couple of things off the top. I think, one of the most exciting developments we rolled out most recently was the partnership between Splunk and Talos Incident Response. So now all Splunk customers have access to Talos IR services, which is huge. So that's a really awesome partnership. We rolled that out at Black Hat, I think, or around Black Hat. And we're also collaborating with Splunk's threat researchers. I think there was a blog recently on the Splunk Threat Research website that was a collaboration between the folks at Talos and some threat researchers at Splunk about the Hendala wiper. So you can kind of see how we're already leveraging both of our skill sets from both organizations to kind of produce some really cool intel. So I think there's more to come. I know, there's also a lot of our intel that is fueling the Splunk attack analyzer. So I think we're at just the beginning stages of this. It's exciting to think about kind of what we can do going forward.
Yes, so for me, Splunk and Cisco are really complementary companies. Actually, we cover security to a great depth, but we're working in very different problem spaces, and of course on the observability side as well. So although maybe your listener base is a lot more security focused, on the observability side, it's a real harmonious pairing as well. So what we're already seeing is customers being very excited about the acquisition. We're very excited about the acquisition as well. And it's just complementary technologies that work very well together to produce a much better security outcome for our customers. And that's really the thing that we're pushing for. That's really the thing we care about the most. And of course, the Cisco team are all very knowledgeable, very intelligent, and very friendly as well. So as a Splunker, I can say it's lovely to also be a Cisconian now as well.
I love it. I would really want to thank both of you for sharing your expertise, and inspiring people who want to get into this field. It can be overwhelming at times, and I'm glad that you've highlighted, don't just concentrate on like collecting a bunch of skills or like programming languages, but concentrate on other things. So for everyone who's watching, I've put links to Kendall and Kirsty's LinkedIn so you can connect, but please don't, send them a million questions. Really want to thank both of you for sharing, and I really want to thank Cisco for sponsoring this video, hoping that we can make the world a more secure place.